Long before empires stretched across deserts, before kings built palaces adorned with gold and lapis lazuli, and even before scribes began to etch stories onto tablets of clay, there was silence, vast and deep, interrupted only by whispers of wind across empty plains. This was Mesopotamia, the land between rivers, nestled quietly between the Tigris and Euphrates. Here the world held its breath, waiting patiently beneath an endless sky, gently shaped by slow-moving waters. In the dawn of civilization, life emerged cautiously, like the first rays of morning sunlight, softly illuminating a world long cloaked in shadow. In the fertile crescent, a crescent-shaped stretch of land enriched by silt deposited from annual floods, small groups of people began to gather. These earliest settlers were wanderers at first, guided by rivers and stars, drifting across gentle landscapes, seeking places where the earth yielded sweet figs, plump dates, and abundant grain. Slowly, as centuries gently passed, like ripples across still waters, these wanderers learned the secrets hidden in the fertile soils. They discovered that by planting seeds, they could coax the land into providing food year after year. Agriculture, perhaps the greatest invention of humanity, was born quietly beside these rivers, in the lands that would one day become known as Mesopotamia. From this simple act of planting seeds, villages began to form. Huts of reed and mud grew along riverbanks, where families gathered beneath stars that seemed impossibly close, as though watching protectively from above. Within these humble dwellings, people whispered dreams of stability, of abundance, and slowly, over generations, these dreams became reality. As villages multiplied along the Tigris and Euphrates, life grew more complex. Fields required organization. Irrigation channels needed careful tending. And so communities learned to cooperate, to communicate, and gradually small groups became larger settlements. It was around this time, nearly 6,000 years ago, that the first true cities began to rise from the fertile earth of southern Mesopotamia. Among these early cities was Uruk, a city whose name would echo across millennia. Here, humanity took one of its most remarkable leaps forward. Uruk became not merely a settlement, but a city of remarkable innovation, home to thousands of people who lived and worked within its protective walls. Life in Uruk centered around the great temple complex. High above the flat landscape rose a monumental ziggurat, a stepped pyramid-like structure built from mud bricks dried under the sun's gentle warmth. The ziggurat, dedicated to Anu, the sky god, and Inanna, the goddess of love and fertility, stood as both spiritual heart and civic hub. Around its base, people gathered for rituals and celebrations, seeking the favor of gods who seemed both close and distant, familiar yet mysterious. As Uruk thrived, artisans began crafting pottery with delicate designs inspired by river patterns, animals, and heavenly bodies. Carpenters and metalworkers shaped tools from copper and bronze, instruments that brought forth more abundant harvests. Slowly, markets emerged beneath awnings of woven reeds, filled with the chatter of merchants exchanging barley, wool, pottery, and delicate beads carved from lapis lazuli, a brilliant blue stone brought from distant mountains, catching sunlight like tiny pieces of sky fallen to earth. But perhaps the most revolutionary innovation of Uruk was born quietly, among scribes working within the temple complex. Faced with the growing complexity of trade and administration, these early record-keepers began pressing simple pictograms onto soft clay tablets, marks meant to represent grain, sheep, oil, and numbers. This humble act, intended merely to track provisions and payments, became the birth of writing, the first form of human expression preserved beyond memory. Known as cuneiform, meaning wedge-shaped, this early writing developed rapidly from pictograms into an elaborate system capable of capturing stories, myths, laws, and dreams. In time, cuneiform tablets would carry the voices of poets and kings, heroes and priests across thousands of years. But in the earliest days, writing was simply a practical tool, allowing people for the first time to preserve information beyond the span of their own lives. As Uruk flourished, other cities also rose along the fertile riverbanks. Cities like Eridu, known as one of the oldest cities in the world, became a sacred pilgrimage site dedicated to Enki, god of wisdom and fresh waters. The city of Ur, birthplace of kings yet unborn, appeared further south, its temple towers rising majestically toward the heavens. Trade routes extended far beyond Mesopotamia, reaching into the distant lands of Egypt, Anatolia, and the Indus Valley. Caravans loaded with precious metals, exotic woods, and rare stones traveled across deserts and mountains, connecting the peoples of ancient civilizations in a vibrant network of cultural exchange. Yet amid this expanding civilization, life remained gentle and rhythmic, governed by cycles of flood and harvest, of sun and moon. The gods were ever present, whispered to in prayers beneath star-filled skies. The rivers gave life, but occasionally overflowed, reminding people of their vulnerability and dependence on the forces of nature. At the heart of these early communities was the sense that humanity was part of something greater, a world filled with mystery, gods, and gentle wonder. Life moved with the grace of the rivers themselves, slow yet certain, ever-changing yet comfortingly familiar. And so, under the soft glow of moonlight, beneath the gaze of constellations that had guided humanity since time immemorial, the people of Mesopotamia slept peacefully, knowing the dawn would come, bringing with it another day of gentle progress, quiet discoveries, and dreams that stretched far beyond their horizons. Little did they know, their humble settlements and simple innovations would become the foundations of all civilizations yet to rise. In the early days of Mesopotamia, life flowed quietly along riverbanks, carried gently forward by waters that nourished the land. Each sunrise painted the horizon in hues of gold and lavender, revealing endless fields of barley swaying gently beneath the morning breeze. Villagers awoke to the comforting sounds of softly murmuring rivers and singing birds, beginning their days much as their ancestors had, bound to rhythms established by nature itself. Yet, even amid this tranquil simplicity, the seeds of remarkable change were slowly taking root. As Uruk and Eridu blossomed into thriving cities, people began crafting more than just practical tools. They began forming culture itself. Clay pottery evolved beyond functionality, taking shapes more elegant and refined. Decorative motifs depicting rivers, stars, animals, and gods adorned cups and bowls, symbolizing a deep connection between humanity and the natural world around them. Music, too, became a part of everyday life. On warm evenings, beneath a sky ablaze with starlight, melodies drifted gently through the air. Harps, flutes, and lyres carved from local wood or ivory echoed softly, telling stories without words, tales of gods, heroes, love, and the passage of time. These gentle tunes comforted listeners, bonding communities through shared moments of peace. It was also a time when humanity's relationship with the divine deepened profoundly. Temples, built painstakingly brick by brick, reached skyward, drawing eyes toward the heavens. In the sacred spaces of the ziggurats, priests and priestesses conducted rituals, praying for abundant harvests, protection from floods, and wisdom in times of uncertainty. The gods, Enki, the wise god of fresh waters, Anu, lord of the sky, and Inanna, goddess of fertility, were believed to live among the clouds, watching protectively from above. Each city held tightly to its own patron deity, believing their god or goddess safeguarded their well-being and prosperity. In Uruk, people honored Inanna with celebrations filled with joyous feasts, dancing, and poetry that praised her boundless vitality. At Eridu, pilgrims traveled to worship Enki, the wise guardian of knowledge and freshwater springs, whose whispers were said to bring clarity to troubled minds. Life was not without its trials, however. The same rivers that nourished crops could overflow unpredictably, sweeping away homes and fields in floods that felt like the wrath of displeased gods. People responded to such challenges with resilience and creativity, developing systems of irrigation, canals, dams, and reservoirs. These early engineering marvels transformed a hostile environment into one where humans could thrive. With careful planning, they learned to harness the rivers, guiding their waters gently into fields of barley, wheat, and lentils, cultivating abundance where once uncertainty prevailed. As generations passed, these thriving communities drew newcomers from across the fertile plains. People arrived from distant villages, seeking the security and prosperity offered by Mesopotamia's burgeoning city-states. With each new arrival, the social structure grew more complex. Skilled craftsmen, traders, builders, and artists enriched city life, contributing diverse talents to a shared vision of communal prosperity. Yet, amidst growing prosperity and complexity, humanity began to encounter entirely new challenges. Wealth created social divisions. Early leaders emerged, priests and warrior chieftains who guided their communities through diplomacy or conflict. Competition arose among cities, at times leading to tensions and disputes. Walls began to surround cities like Uruk and Ur, testaments to the need for protection, yet also symbols of pride and achievement. Even so, the age of cities remained largely peaceful, marked more by cooperation than conflict. Trade flourished along rivers and caravan routes, spreading Mesopotamian culture and innovations far beyond the Tigris and Euphrates. Precious metals arrived from Anatolia, lapis lazuli from distant Afghanistan, and timber from the cedar forests of Lebanon. In return, Mesopotamian pottery, textiles, and grain traveled outward, building bridges of commerce and friendship across wide, interconnected lands. Perhaps the greatest gift these early Mesopotamians gave to the world was storytelling. Around evening fires, elders spoke tales of creation, adventure, and heroism, passing knowledge from generation to generation. Foremost among these early legends was the story of Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, whose life blended history, myth, and poetry. Gilgamesh, described as 2/3 god and 1/3 human, embodied the dreams and fears of his people. In the tale, he journeyed across distant lands, seeking immortality, but ultimately discovering the beauty in life's fragility and the quiet joy of simple human companionship. Though Gilgamesh's quest for eternal life remained unfulfilled, the story itself achieved immortality, etched in cuneiform onto clay tablets, preserved across millennia. Stories like these provided comfort and understanding in a world that often seemed vast and unpredictable. They reminded people of their connection to something greater than themselves, a lineage stretching back to the dawn of humanity. Forward into an uncertain, yet hopeful future. And so, beneath gentle stars and softly glowing moons, the people of Mesopotamia built lives of quiet dignity and growing sophistication. Their dreams were not of conquest or empire, but of stability and contentment. The simple joy of seeing their children grow strong and their communities flourish in peace. Little did they know, their quiet innovations would someday form the very foundations of human civilization. Their humble cities, gentle music, careful records, and rich storytelling would echo across time, shaping cultures yet unborn. As night once again embraced the fertile plains between the rivers, a gentle peace settled over the city-states of ancient Mesopotamia. Men and women, children and elders slept beneath softly drifting clouds, secure in their homes built of sun-dried bricks. The gentle murmur of the rivers carried their dreams forward into the night, toward a future of great kings and mighty empires yet unseen. But for now, Mesopotamia rested quietly, comforted by the reassuring presence of gods who watched tenderly from above, guardians of a civilization slowly waking to its extraordinary destiny. As centuries quietly passed in Mesopotamia, small villages had gently evolved into vibrant cities, breathing life and culture along the fertile banks of the Tigris and Euphrates. Now, a new chapter began beneath the warm Mesopotamian sun. The era of Sumer, a civilization that would transform humble beginnings into lasting wonders. Sumer, nestled in southern Mesopotamia, emerged around 5,000 years ago, a patchwork of independent city-states, each rising from rich soil and dreams of prosperity. These city-states, Uruk, Lagash, Eridu, Nippur, grew independently, each becoming distinct worlds unto themselves. Yet despite their fierce pride, the people of Sumer were connected deeply, bound together by shared language, religion, and culture. Each city-state had its own guardian deity, a divine protector who guided daily life and watched from towering temples. In the moon god Nana ruled over nights filled with silver moonlight. In Lagash, the god Ningirsu oversaw harvests and ensured plentiful grain. The city of Nippur revered Enlil, the mighty god of air and storms, whose voice echoed in thunderstorms and gentle breezes alike. At the heart of each city rose the ziggurat, a monumental temple whose stepped terraces reached toward the sky, bridging earth and heavens. Built with sun-baked mud bricks, carefully laid one upon another, ziggurats symbolized the Sumerians' profound desire to reach the divine. Each ziggurat glowed softly in golden hues at dawn and dusk, their forms visible from miles around, signaling the sacred heart of each city-state. Beneath these imposing structures, bustling markets filled with sounds of merchants bartering goods. Traders from distant lands brought precious stones, fine cloth, copper, and fragrant spices. Local craftsmen showcased beautiful pottery painted with geometric designs and animals, bronze tools forged with skill and precision, and intricately woven garments. Streets hummed gently with life, conversations blending like the waters of their beloved rivers. In the homes lining the narrow streets, daily life moved to gentle rhythms. Families woke early to tend fields irrigated by canals that gracefully wove through the landscape. Children played in shady courtyards, their laughter carried softly by warm breezes. Women and men shared responsibilities, grinding grain, baking bread in clay ovens, and spinning wool into garments that provided comfort against cool evenings. Yet Sumer was far more than simple domestic tranquility. The Sumerians pioneered remarkable innovations, quietly reshaping civilization itself. Foremost among these was their system of writing, Cuneiform, now evolving swiftly into a powerful and versatile tool. What began as simple accounting records had transformed into a complex script, capable of capturing poetry, history, mathematics, astronomy, and even law. Scribes, working meticulously with sharpened reeds, pressed wedge-shaped marks into soft clay tablets. Once baked in the sun, these tablets preserved knowledge for countless generations, their voices whispering gently across millennia. Schools appeared near temples, quiet rooms where young scribes learned their craft with patience and precision. Students practiced long hours, copying symbols again and again, mastering skills that would enable their civilization's wisdom to survive the passage of time. Alongside writing, the Sumerians invented essential technologies that quietly changed everyday life. The wheel, a humble yet revolutionary innovation, first appeared in Sumer. At first, wheels were simple discs of wood attached to carts, making transport of heavy loads, grain, clay bricks, and precious metals far easier. Soon after, potters adapted wheels to shape graceful pottery, spinning vessels swiftly and uniformly, transforming crafts into art. Mathematics blossomed in Sumer, driven by practical needs. The Sumerians developed a sophisticated numbering system based on the number 60, laying the groundwork for the 60-minute hour and 360-degree circle we still use today. Merchants calculated debts and transactions swiftly, while astronomers carefully charted movements of stars and planets, observing celestial cycles that guided planting and harvest seasons. Indeed, the skies above Sumer held great fascination for its people. Astronomers atop temple towers observed the night sky with awe and reverence, believing the movements of celestial bodies contained messages from the gods. These early stargazers charted constellations, recorded eclipses, and meticulously documented lunar phases. Their observations were not merely scientific, but deeply spiritual, blending knowledge with a profound sense of wonder and humility. Medicine, too, emerged quietly as an art and science in Sumer. Physicians combined careful observation with practical remedies drawn from nature. Clay tablets contained prescriptions for herbal mixtures, ointments, and salves, alongside gentle prayers seeking healing from compassionate deities. This blend of practical wisdom and spiritual comfort provided reassurance in times of illness, reflecting a society that valued harmony between humanity and the divine. Despite their advancements, the Sumerians faced frequent challenges. The same rivers that nurtured life could bring devastating floods, washing away fields and homes with sudden fury. Yet each flood taught valuable lessons. Canals grew wider and deeper, levees higher, and cities safer. Cooperation became essential, fostering a sense of community and resilience. Through shared effort, the people of Sumer learned to manage nature, gently guiding rivers to ensure prosperity and security. Amid this balance of innovation and tradition, Sumerian society grew more structured. Kings emerged, not as absolute rulers, but as protectors and leaders chosen by the gods. These early kings maintained temples, led armies when threats arose, and ensured justice among their people. Their authority, however, remained closely tied to divine approval, a bond symbolized in sacred rituals that reminded rulers of their responsibility to serve the community. Within this stable framework, Sumer continued to thrive, its cities expanding in quiet grandeur beneath blue skies. People shared stories beneath starlit nights, tales of gods and goddesses, heroes and ordinary lives shaped by courage and wisdom. They knew little of the vast future awaiting their civilization. Their thoughts were of family, community, and the daily rhythms that brought gentle joy and quiet purpose to their lives. Yet history would remember Sumer clearly. Its humble innovations, writings, wheels, mathematics, and structured societies would ripple outward across centuries, laying firm foundations upon which all future civilizations would build. And so, beneath the soft glow of twilight, the people of Sumer rested quietly, unaware their gentle progress would echo forever. The cities of Sumer flourished gently beneath the Mesopotamian sun, each carefully building upon innovations and customs passed down through generations. Daily life was richly woven with rituals and routines, guided by an unwavering devotion to harmony, wisdom, and the divine. In every aspect of their society, the Sumerians embraced a careful balance between innovation and reverence, practicality and spirituality, community and individuality. At the heart of this balance were the temples, the great centers of Sumerian civilization. Within their sacred walls, priests and priestesses conducted rituals with quiet dignity, their voices rising softly in prayers and chants dedicated to the gods who watched over humanity. The temples not only served as spiritual sanctuaries, but as cultural hubs, storing grain in vast storehouses, recording harvests and trade, and providing shelter and aid in times of hardship. Here, scribes meticulously chronicled daily events, births and marriages, ensuring a record of life itself, preserved carefully for generations yet unborn. Beyond these sacred spaces, the lives of ordinary people moved with the quiet rhythm of fields and marketplaces. Each morning, farmers set out before sunrise to tend their crops, barley, wheat, onions, garlic, and dates, watered gently by irrigation canals carefully maintained by the community. Shepherds guided flocks to pasture, the soft bleating of sheep blending with the morning songs of birds. Craftsmen and women opened their workshops, shaping clay, spinning wool, forging bronze, and carving wood into useful tools and graceful objects that filled homes with warmth and simple beauty. Markets opened as the day brightened, filled with colorful awnings, shading merchants as they exchanged goods and stories beneath the sun's gentle warmth. Here, transactions occurred with easy conversation and laughter, neighbors bartering grain for textiles, pottery for spices, copper tools for beads of lapis lazuli. Commerce was more than mere exchange. It was a ritual of friendship and connection, binding communities together through mutual benefit and shared goodwill. Education, too, began to flourish. The first known schools appeared in Sumer, small buildings near temples where young scribes sat patiently, pressing reed styluses into clay tablets. They studied literature, mathematics, astronomy, and history. Teachers, often strict yet deeply caring, instilled in their students the importance of accuracy, patience, and respect for knowledge. Graduates of these schools would become administrators, scribes, priests, and community leaders, guiding their city-states with wisdom and compassion. The Sumerians cherished their leisure as well, embracing life's gentle pleasures with enthusiasm and creativity. Festivals, celebrated at regular intervals throughout the year, brought communities together in joyous gatherings. Streets filled with music, poetry, dancing, and feasting as citizens honored their patron deities with heartfelt devotion. The festival of the New Year was especially beloved, marking the renewal of life and the land itself. During these celebrations, even kings participated openly, reinforcing bonds between rulers and citizens in a shared spirit of unity and joy. Yet Sumer was not without its trials. Its prosperity occasionally drew envy from nomadic peoples beyond its borders. Tensions between city-states, too, arose from competition over resources like water and fertile lands. Wars were infrequent, but not unknown, often brief and resolved through diplomacy rather than prolonged violence. Armies composed mostly of citizen soldiers armed with bronze spears and shields would gather to protect their cities. Yet even in conflict, the Sumerians sought swift resolution, preferring peace and stability to ongoing strife. It was in this context that the world's earliest known laws appeared. Rulers began issuing legal codes written in cuneiform, inscribed on clay tablets and stone monuments placed prominently in city squares. These early laws were practical, covering disputes over property, trade, marriage, and community obligations. They reflected a society deeply committed to fairness, stability, and harmony. Citizens gathered before these monuments, knowing clearly their rights and responsibilities, guided gently by rules intended to preserve peace and prosperity for all. While daily life and governance developed, Sumerian culture blossomed beautifully in literature and storytelling. Poets and scribes crafted epic tales, hymns, prayers, and wisdom literature that explored human emotions, divine mysteries, and practical guidance for life's journey. Foremost among these was the Epic of Gilgamesh, now refined and expanded, recounting the legendary king's profound adventures and heartfelt search for immortality. These stories provided comfort, teaching audiences about human fragility, courage, and the gentle acceptance of life's fleeting nature. Sumerians also excelled in art and sculpture. Skilled artisans carved statues depicting gods, kings, and common people, capturing expressions of quiet dignity and serene beauty. Bronze sculptures, pottery, cylinder seals, and delicate jewelry adorned with semi-precious stones revealed a refined aesthetic, emphasizing balance, symmetry, and a profound respect for nature's inherent beauty. Architecture, too, evolved steadily. Homes became larger and more comfortable, constructed of mud bricks shaped carefully by hand, dried in warm sunlight. Inner courtyards brought fresh air and gentle light into family spaces, creating peaceful retreats within bustling cities. Palaces and temples grew more elaborate, their walls decorated with colorful murals and intricate carvings illustrating scenes from daily life and mythological tales. Even the urban layout of Sumerian cities reflected their careful attention to harmony. Streets were orderly and logical, guiding residents gently through city centers toward temple complexes and markets. Sewer systems appeared, modest yet functional, illustrating the practical yet refined approach the Sumerians brought to urban living. As day turned to night, the cities of Sumer settled quietly beneath a blanket of stars. Families gathered together in homes softly illuminated by oil lamps, sharing meals and recounting the day's events. Children listened eagerly to stories from elders, tales filled with gentle wisdom, adventures, and comforting morals. Under this peaceful evening sky, life in Sumer continued much as it had for generations, quietly progressive, balanced thoughtfully between tradition and innovation. People rested easily, secure in their homes and hearts, comforted by the knowledge that their civilization's quiet accomplishments, writing, law, architecture, art, would gently echo across time, shaping countless generations yet to come. As sleep settled softly over the city-states of Sumer, no one could know the profound impact their daily lives would have. Yet beneath stars that shone with eternal calm, a civilization dreamed quietly, unknowingly, preparing to hand its legacy forward to humanity's great unfolding story. Under the vast Mesopotamian sky, change often arrived gently, like the slow rise of the moon, quietly illuminating lands long familiar. Yet sometimes history moved swiftly, carried forward by extraordinary individuals whose ambitions reshaped the very course of civilizations. Such was the story of Sargon, a humble figure who rose from obscurity to become one of the world's first great empire builders. Sargon's tale begins in mystery, wrapped in layers of legend and quiet wonder. Born around 2334 BCE, the precise details of his early life remain softly obscured by the passage of time. Mesopotamian scribes later recorded his story with a touch of poetic imagination, whispering that Sargon had been gently placed in a reed basket as a newborn, set adrift upon the Euphrates River. A poignant beginning reminiscent of other great leaders, yet unborn. Discovered and rescued by a gardener named Akkad, Sargon was raised in humble surroundings. His childhood was one of quiet dignity and hard work, tending gardens beneath the golden Mesopotamian sun, his days marked by simplicity and purpose. Yet even as he grew, Sargon felt something greater stirring within him, an ambition, quiet yet persistent, like a river steadily carving a path through stone. In these early days, Sumer remained a land of independent city-states, each fiercely proud of its identity. Yet beneath the veneer of peace and prosperity, rivalries quietly simmered. Tensions rose occasionally over land and water rights, trade routes, and influence. Into this delicate balance stepped Sargon, whose vision of unity would forever change the Mesopotamian landscape. His path toward greatness began quietly, with Sargon serving as a cupbearer for the ruler of the city-state Kish, King Ur-Zababa. Though humble, this position placed Sargon close to power, observing the workings of statecraft and diplomacy. Sargon watched, learned, and waited patiently for an opportunity to reveal his true potential. That moment arrived unexpectedly, like a whisper carried by gentle winds. Kish, like many cities, faced frequent conflicts with neighboring states, particularly the city-state of Uruk, then ruled by a formidable king named Lugal-Zarghesi. As tensions rose, Sargon seized an opportunity, swiftly, decisively, yet with remarkable cunning. Gathering a loyal following among soldiers and common citizens who admired his wisdom and courage, Sargon quietly raised an army, small yet fiercely dedicated. When the moment was right, he moved swiftly, taking control of Kish and establishing himself as its new ruler. Rather than dwelling on internal strife, he swiftly turned outward, guided by a vision no leader before him had pursued, a vision of a unified Mesopotamia. City by city, Sargon expanded his rule. His approach was careful, balanced between diplomacy and force. Many cities surrendered peacefully, recognizing the advantage of unity over conflict. Others resisted briefly, their defenses swiftly overcome by Sargon's disciplined forces. Each city he captured, Sargon treated gently yet firmly, preserving temples and traditions, allowing local leaders to retain dignity while clearly asserting his own authority. In a dramatic confrontation, Sargon faced the powerful Lugal-Zarghesi of Uruk, who had recently claimed dominance over much of southern Mesopotamia. The clash was swift and decisive. Sargon's forces, though modest, moved with precision, guided by their leader's strategic brilliance. Lugal-Zarghesi was defeated, his city peacefully integrated into Sargon's rapidly growing dominion. This victory symbolized a quiet yet profound shift from independent city-states toward the formation of the world's first true empire. With Mesopotamia united under his gentle but firm rule, Sargon built a new capital city, Akkad, situated strategically near the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Akkad became not merely a city, but the heart of a vibrant new civilization that combined elements of Sumerian culture with innovations uniquely Akkadian. Its streets buzzed gently with merchants, artisans, scribes, and soldiers drawn from across Sargon's newly formed empire, blending languages, traditions, and ideas into a harmonious whole. One of Sargon's most transformative actions was his embrace of Akkadian as the official language of administration, trade, and diplomacy. While Sumerian remained revered as the language of literature, religion, and scholarship, Akkadian, clear, practical, and widely accessible, spread swiftly. Scribes across the empire mastered this language, recording decrees, laws, and diplomatic correspondence on clay tablets that would preserve Akkadian thought and culture for millennia. Under Sargon's wise rule, trade flourished as never before. His empire, stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea, opened trade routes far beyond Mesopotamia. Ships and caravans moved gently across seas and deserts, carrying textiles, metals, grains, spices, and precious stones. Merchants from distant lands, Egypt, Anatolia, and the Indus Valley, journeyed to Akkad and its sister cities, fostering connections that enriched the lives of countless citizens. Sargon understood the quiet power of culture and religion in uniting his empire. He carefully respected local beliefs, ensuring temples were maintained, priests and priestesses honored, and rituals continued uninterrupted. This tolerance promoted loyalty among diverse populations who saw in Sargon a protector of their traditions rather than a conqueror bent solely on domination. Yet despite his considerable achievements, Sargon remained humble, aware of life's gentle fragility. He often wandered quietly through Akkad streets, observing his citizens' daily lives, listening carefully to their concerns. His rule was not distant or cold, but warm and human, marked by genuine compassion and understanding. At his court, poets and musicians celebrated his achievements, crafting stories and hymns that softly praised his wisdom and strength. These tales of Sargon spread throughout the empire, carried gently from village to city, reminding citizens of the unity and prosperity their ruler had brought. As evening fell gently across the empire, people returned to their homes, secure in the peace Sargon had established. In Akkad, beneath starry skies, reflected softly in quiet waters, citizens gathered in markets and squares, sharing stories and laughter, their voices blending into a harmonious hum of community. Under Sargon's gentle guidance, Mesopotamia had entered a new era, one of unity, prosperity, and peace. Yet no one could know how long this harmony would endure, or how history might remember this quietly remarkable man who had begun life floating gently down a river, yet whose ambitions had carried an entire civilization toward greatness. As darkness softly embraced Akkad and cities throughout the empire, dreams of peace and unity settled upon the land, guided by the reassuring presence of a leader whose gentle strength had forever changed the course of history. In the quiet years that followed Sargon's rise to power, Mesopotamia flourished beneath the calm skies of Akkad, a land gently bound together by a visionary whose dreams had become reality. Under Sargon's wise rule, the Akkadian Empire blossomed, becoming a tapestry of diverse peoples woven harmoniously into a single civilization. Sargon's empire, vast and peaceful, stretched impressively from the warm Persian Gulf shores to the Mediterranean coast. Within this expansive territory, many cultures coexisted, exchanging ideas, crafts, languages, and innovations, gently enriching each other's lives. The empire was not simply a collection of territories. It was a cultural melting pot where traditions blended softly, creating something new yet familiar to all who lived within its borders. At the heart of this empire stood Akkad, its bustling streets echoing softly with voices from every corner of Mesopotamia and beyond. Merchants displayed vibrant fabrics, rare gems, spices, and pottery. Traders from Egypt and the distant Indus Valley brought exotic goods, their tales of faraway lands igniting imaginations as evening shadows lengthened across the city's marketplace. Inside Akkad's palaces and temples, scribes continued their meticulous work, carefully pressing reeds into clay tablets, recording the empire's history with gentle dedication. Their tablets captured not only decrees and laws, but also poems, hymns, and tales of daily life, preserving a rich mosaic of culture for future generations. Sargon himself oversaw this thriving civilization with quiet confidence, ensuring justice and prosperity reached even the smallest village. He established an efficient bureaucracy, choosing wise officials based on merit rather than birthright, fostering a fair society where talent and integrity flourished. His governors, carefully selected and trusted, maintained peace and stability, gently extending the empire's influence without oppression. Under Sargon's administration, roads were built and improved, linking cities and villages more closely. These roads, humble yet vital, facilitated trade, communication, and travel, allowing ideas and innovations to spread quietly yet rapidly across vast distances. For the first time, Mesopotamia truly felt unified, connected by well-tended pathways that gently guided travelers from city to city. Yet despite the impressive stability of his empire, Sargon never rested comfortably. He understood well the gentle yet persistent pressures of leadership. His rule required constant care and quiet vigilance, as ambitious rivals occasionally tested the strength of Akkad's unity. But Sargon, guided by wisdom rather than harshness, navigated these challenges deftly, often preferring diplomacy to war, negotiation to violence. Through peaceful resolutions, he secured lasting alliances and mutual respect, ensuring the empire's tranquility. As the empire grew and matured, Akkadian culture gently permeated every corner of Mesopotamia. Akkadian literature, deeply influenced by earlier Sumerian works, flourished. Tales of Sargon's own life, part myth, part history, spread across his empire, inspiring awe and respect. Poets softly celebrated his humble origins and extraordinary rise, reinforcing his legacy as a compassionate ruler chosen by the gods themselves. Art and architecture also thrived, reflecting Akkad's peaceful prosperity. Palaces became graceful, filled with frescoes and reliefs depicting daily life and sacred rituals. Temples dedicated to Akkadian and Sumerian gods alike rose majestically, their architecture blending seamlessly old traditions with subtle innovations, symbolizing the empire's unity and reverence for diverse heritages. Sargon's personal life remained quiet, shrouded gently in respectful privacy. Yet we know he raised a daughter named Enheduanna, whose remarkable legacy would rival even her father's greatness. Enheduanna, gifted with a profound poetic spirit, served as a high priestess of the moon god Nanna in the city of Ur. She authored exquisite hymns and poems, softly capturing the essence of human devotion to the divine. Enheduanna's words, etched in clay tablets, remain the earliest known writings attributed definitively to a named author. A quiet yet extraordinary accomplishment, echoing softly across millennia. As Sargon aged, he contemplated deeply the empire's future, carefully preparing for the transition of power. He guided his sons and successors gently, emphasizing wisdom, fairness, and humility, qualities he had quietly embodied throughout his life. Sargon understood the delicate nature of empires, built not solely through force, but by the bonds of trust, respect, and mutual care he had patiently fostered among his people. After ruling for over half a century, Sargon passed quietly into history, leaving behind an empire stronger, yet gently humbled by the legacy of his humanity. His successors, inspired by his example, would carry forward his vision, guiding Mesopotamia through further generations of prosperity. Yet none would surpass the gentle strength, compassion, and quiet brilliance that defined his reign. In the years following his passing, the Akkadian Empire continued to thrive, a testament to Sargon's careful planning and enduring wisdom. But empires, like rivers, flow gently onward, changing shape over time. Future generations would see Akkad face new challenges, natural disasters, internal tensions, and external pressures. Yet even as the Akkadian Empire gradually faded, Sargon's legacy lived on, remembered with quiet reverence in countless stories, tablets, and memories, gently passed down through generations. Under softly glowing starlight, the empire he built rested peacefully, secure in the unity and stability he had created. The gentle currents of the Tigris and Euphrates flowed quietly beneath moonlit skies, much as they had during Sargon's humble beginnings. Families gathered around evening fires, recounting the extraordinary life of their beloved king, whose humble origins and gentle spirit had inspired an entire civilization. As the night embraced the land, the people of Mesopotamia dreamed softly, knowing their empire had been shaped not through force alone, but through compassion, wisdom, and gentle strength. The memory of Sargon, king of Akkad, softly lingered, an enduring testament to the quiet power of dreams, determination, and human kindness. And so, under the watchful gaze of stars that had guided humanity from the beginning, the land of Mesopotamia rested peacefully, gently aware of its rich heritage, quietly awaiting the next chapter of its extraordinary story. Time, like the gentle current of the Euphrates, carried Mesopotamia steadily forward. Long after Sargon's great empire had softened into memories and quiet echoes, a new city began rising gently yet steadily, destined to illuminate the landscape once again. This city was Babylon, and its golden age was ushered in by a remarkable leader whose wisdom and justice would resonate softly through history: Hammurabi. Babylon was initially modest, nestled comfortably along the banks of the gently flowing Euphrates. In its early days, it was little more than a humble city-state, quietly watching the rise and fall of neighbors and rivals. But from these quiet beginnings, Babylon steadily grew in significance, gradually emerging as a center of culture, commerce, and power. Born around 1810 BCE, Hammurabi ascended to Babylon's throne in approximately 1792 BCE, inheriting a modest realm. His city-state was surrounded by powerful neighbors, Assyria to the north, Elam to the east, and numerous ambitious city-states scattered across Mesopotamia. Yet despite these daunting challenges, Hammurabi was undeterred. He was quietly confident, a man of vision and deep compassion, qualities that would soon transform Babylon into one of history's most enduring symbols of civilization. At first, Hammurabi acted cautiously, strengthening his city internally. He carefully rebuilt Babylon's walls, expanded irrigation canals, and invested in granaries to ensure ample harvests for his people. His focus was stability, peace, and gentle growth. Hammurabi knew prosperity required firm foundations, carefully constructed from trust, order, and fairness. He approached diplomacy thoughtfully, patiently nurturing alliances and quietly resolving disputes with neighbors. When diplomacy faltered, he responded decisively, yet gently, ensuring conflicts ended swiftly, restoring peace rather than prolonging violence. His wisdom soon gained widespread respect, positioning Babylon as a city whose word could be trusted, whose agreements were honored. Slowly, through careful strategy and measured ambition, Hammurabi began expanding his influence. Neighboring cities willingly submitted to Babylon's gentle yet firm rule, recognizing the advantages of his governance. With each new territory peacefully incorporated, Babylon's resources multiplied, enriching the lives of its citizens and creating a network of cities bound by loyalty and mutual benefit. Yet Hammurabi's true genius lay not merely in political ambition, but in his profound dedication to justice. He understood deeply that lasting empires required more than strength or wealth. They demanded fairness, clarity, and compassion. With this in mind, Hammurabi embarked upon his most enduring legacy, the creation of one of history's earliest and most influential legal codes. Known today as the Code of Hammurabi, this groundbreaking set of laws gently yet firmly outlined justice for Babylon's diverse people. Carved carefully onto a towering basalt stele, the code included over 200 precise laws addressing issues from trade and property to marriage, inheritance, and even medical malpractice. This monumental stone, etched meticulously with cuneiform script, stood prominently in Babylon's central square, accessible to all. Hammurabi's laws were designed to maintain harmony and fairness within society. He declared clearly the rights and responsibilities of each citizen, from nobles to laborers, artisans to farmers. Each law carefully balanced justice and compassion, punishment and mercy. Hammurabi himself described his purpose eloquently: to bring about the rule of righteousness so that the strong should not harm the weak. This gentle yet firm commitment to fairness ensured Babylonian society flourished peacefully. Citizens knew their rights, trusted the system, and respected authority. Laws were applied consistently, creating a sense of security and mutual trust among people of every status and occupation. Under Hammurabi's thoughtful leadership, Babylon experienced a remarkable cultural flourishing. The city itself blossomed gracefully, its architecture rising with elegance and dignity. Temples dedicated to gods like Marduk, Babylon's patron deity, were rebuilt and expanded, their facades adorned with vibrant glazed bricks that shimmered softly beneath the Mesopotamian sun. Palaces and public buildings featured intricate murals and carvings depicting life, nature, and sacred rituals, their beauty reflecting the city's refined cultural spirit. Hammurabi also promoted education, ensuring that Babylon's youth, both male and female, had access to knowledge. Schools appeared near temples, offering lessons in mathematics, writing, astronomy, and law. Young scribes carefully copied texts onto clay tablets, preserving Babylon's cultural heritage and expanding intellectual horizons. Poetry and literature thrived, reflecting the city's creative spirit. Hammurabi himself fostered this cultural vitality, supporting artists, poets, musicians, and astronomers who gently illuminated Babylon's golden age. Commerce, too, thrived under Hammurabi's guidance. Babylon became a major trading hub, with merchants from across Mesopotamia and distant lands gathering in vibrant marketplaces. Goods from Egypt, Anatolia, Persia, and the Indus Valley filled the city's stalls: spices, textiles, pottery, precious metals, and fine jewelry. Trade was regulated thoughtfully, guided by Hammurabi's laws, ensuring fair prices, standardized weights and measures, and secure transactions. Prosperity grew quietly, enriching lives across the empire. Life in Hammurabi's Babylon was defined by tranquility and quiet prosperity. Families gathered in comfortable homes, constructed carefully from mud bricks and timber, surrounding peaceful inner courtyards. Meals of bread, dates, vegetables, and occasional meat were shared warmly around hearth fires. Stories passed from elders to children beneath softly flickering oil lamps, teaching gentle lessons of virtue, courage, and compassion. Even in this age of gentle prosperity, Hammurabi remained modest, deeply committed to his people's well-being. He frequently walked among citizens, listening carefully to their concerns, quietly ensuring justice reached even the poorest households. His presence reassured citizens, reminding them their ruler cared deeply and genuinely for their welfare. As Babylon flourished quietly beneath Hammurabi's careful rule, its reputation spread gently across Mesopotamia. Neighboring kingdoms admired its stability, justice, and prosperity, seeking friendship and alliance with this beacon of civilization. Yet Hammurabi remained humble, aware of his responsibilities and limitations, always guided by fairness and compassion rather than pride. Each evening, as gentle twilight bathed Babylon's golden buildings in soft hues, families gathered safely behind walls constructed by Hammurabi's careful hands. Stars began to twinkle quietly above, symbols of a city whose brightness now rivaled the heavens themselves. Babylon, under Hammurabi's gentle guidance, stood quietly at the height of its glory, a city of justice, compassion, and culture, a place where dreams were realized gently and civilization shone softly yet brilliantly beneath the eternal Mesopotamian sky. As the days passed gently over Babylon, the city blossomed into a shining jewel upon the Mesopotamian plain, a place where dreams, learning, and justice lived side by side. Hammurabi, the steady heart of this golden era, continued to guide his people with a wisdom that few rulers before or after would match. His legal code had not only ordered the lives of Babylon's citizens, but had quietly transformed the very idea of leadership. To Hammurabi, kingship was not merely a divine right, it was a sacred duty, a bond between ruler and ruled, woven carefully with threads of trust, fairness, and service. In daily life, the echoes of Hammurabi's code could be felt everywhere. In the marketplaces, merchants exchanged goods with a confidence protected by clear, fair regulations. In the fields beyond the city, farmers tended their crops, knowing that land rights and water access were safeguarded by law. Even in disputes over debts, marriage, or inheritance, Citizens could appeal to the written word, secure in the knowledge that justice was not arbitrary, but grounded in shared values. Education, too, continued to flourish under Hammurabi's nurturing hand. Schools expanded, and libraries grew as scribes recorded not just transactions and decrees, but also poetry, myths, astronomy, and medicine. Literacy became a treasured skill, and knowledge was gently passed from one generation to the next, carried like a sacred flame through the corridors of time. Babylonian scholars gazed at the stars, recording the dance of celestial bodies with astonishing accuracy. They mapped constellations, predicted eclipses, and created early calendars based on the lunar cycle. These observations were not only scientific, but deeply spiritual, a way of reading the messages of the gods woven into the night sky. In medicine, healers and doctors worked with herbal remedies, surgical techniques, and careful observation. Their treatments were recorded meticulously, blending practical experience with divine supplication. Illness in Babylon was seen as both a physical and a spiritual affliction, requiring care of the body and prayers for the soul. Art and architecture reached new heights of beauty and sophistication. Temples rose higher, adorned with glazed tiles that caught the sunlight and shimmered like precious jewels. Relief carvings told stories of gods, kings, and everyday people, their faces rendered with tenderness and realism. Music filled the air, harps, flutes, drums, bringing rhythm and joy to the bustling streets and tranquil gardens. Throughout it all, Hammurabi remained a figure of stability and compassion. He traveled frequently through his empire, visiting distant cities and villages, listening patiently to grievances, resolving disputes, and reaffirming the connection between the king and his people. His journeys were not grand processions of conquest, but quiet pilgrimages of governance, strengthening the bonds of loyalty and trust. As Hammurabi aged, he began to contemplate the legacy he would leave behind. He understood that the strength of Babylon didn't lie only in its walls or wealth, but in its ideas, in the belief that justice and compassion were the true foundations of civilization. He carefully prepared his successors, ensuring that the principles he had established would endure beyond his own lifetime. His sons were educated not only in warfare and governance, but also in ethics, law, and diplomacy. Hammurabi's vision was not for fleeting glory, but for a lasting peace built upon fairness and wisdom. In his final years, Hammurabi witnessed the full flowering of Babylon's golden age. Trade routes stretched across Mesopotamia and beyond, bringing goods, ideas, and cultures together in a rich and vibrant tapestry. Babylon had become a center of learning, faith, and prosperity, its reputation shining like a beacon across the ancient world. When Hammurabi passed from this world, he did so quietly, surrounded by the civilization he had nurtured so carefully. His death marked the end of an extraordinary era, but his spirit lived on, in the laws he had crafted, the culture he had fostered, and the dreams he had dared to make real. The empire he built would face challenges in the years to come: new rulers, external threats, internal divisions. Yet for a time, Babylon stood serene and proud, a testament to what humanity could achieve when guided by wisdom, compassion, and justice. And as the stars wheeled silently above the great city, their cold, brilliant light falling upon temple spires and palace rooftops, the people of Babylon continued to live, work, dream, and hope, sheltered by the memory of a king who had loved them as a father loves his children. Thus, Hammurabi's Babylon became more than a city. It became a symbol, a quiet promise whispered across the winds of history, that civilization, at its best, could be a force for good, for fairness, and for peace. And though the rivers of time would one day carry Babylon into legend, the gentle echoes of Hammurabi's reign would ripple forever onward, shaping the destiny of peoples and nations for countless generations to come. As the quiet centuries drifted onward, the once glorious cities of Sumer and Akkad began to fade softly into memory. Yet Mesopotamia, with its fertile rivers and boundless skies, remained a cradle for new powers to rise. Among the scattered city-states and forgotten ruins, a fierce and determined people slowly gathered their strength in the rugged northern lands. They would come to be known and feared as the Assyrians. The early Assyrians lived in the city of Asher, perched on the western banks of the Tigris River. Compared to the wealthier cities of the south, Asher began humbly. Its people were traders, craftsmen, farmers, and hunters, living simple lives shaped by the rhythms of nature and the steady pull of the seasons. Their gods were strong, yet stern. Chief among them was Asher, the city's patron deity, who embodied war, protection, and destiny. In the quiet hours of evening, under stars so bright they seemed to pulse with life, the people offered prayers for safety, for bounty, and for strength to endure whatever hardships life might bring. Endurance, indeed, became the Assyrian way. Life in northern Mesopotamia demanded resilience. The land was more rugged, the climate harsher. Raids from nomadic tribes were common, and survival required vigilance, cooperation, and strength. Over time, these necessities shaped the Assyrian spirit, unyielding, disciplined, patient. While the early centuries passed quietly, change came gradually, like a river carving deep channels through stone. Trade routes that connected Anatolia, Persia, and Egypt flowed through Asher, and with them came new wealth, new ideas, and new ambitions. Assyrian merchants traveled far and wide, exchanging tin, textiles, and lapis lazuli for gold, silver, and precious cedar wood from distant lands. As their prosperity grew, so too did their aspirations. No longer content to merely survive, the Assyrians began to organize themselves more formally, developing systems of governance, taxation, and law that reflected their increasingly complex society. Kings emerged, chosen not merely by divine right, but by their ability to lead armies, to protect, and to expand. It was during these early centuries that the Assyrians began to develop their most distinctive characteristic, their military excellence. Unlike the loosely organized militias of earlier Mesopotamian cities, the Assyrians built a standing army, professional, disciplined, and relentless. Soldiers trained year-round, mastering the bow, the spear, the sword, and the chariot. Engineers developed siege technologies, battering rams, sappers who dug tunnels beneath enemy walls, and mobile towers that allowed archers to fire over city defenses. The Assyrian army moved like a living machine, swift, adaptable, and devastating. Yet it was not cruelty alone that made them formidable. It was their organization, their mastery of logistics, and their unyielding discipline that made the Assyrians a force unlike any the world had ever seen. Their expansion, however, was slow at first, measured and methodical. Neighboring city-states were incorporated peacefully, when possible, through treaties and diplomacy. Only when resistance proved stubborn did the full might of the Assyrian army reveal itself, swift and overwhelming like a sudden storm. Throughout these early conquests, the Assyrians maintained a deep respect for tradition and the gods of the lands they absorbed. Temples were preserved. Local rulers, when loyal, were often allowed to remain in power as vassals. The Assyrians understood that ruling was not only about conquest, it was about governance, about weaving together the different peoples of their growing domain into a single, stable tapestry. Among the kings who began this slow, steady ascent, names like Shamshi-Adad would one day be remembered. Shamshi-Adad, ruling in the 18th century BCE, extended Assyrian influence over much of northern Mesopotamia. His reign was marked by careful administration, military prowess, and the creation of a network of fortified cities linked by roads that allowed rapid communication and the swift movement of troops. Shamshi-Adad also understood the power of narrative. He commissioned grand inscriptions boasting of his victories, his building projects, and his devotion to the gods. In doing so, he laid the foundation for a tradition that future Assyrian kings would perfect, the art of imperial propaganda, using words and images to project power and divine favor across the lands. Yet for all their strength, the Assyrians remained vulnerable to the tides of history. After Shamshi-Adad's death, Assyria fell into a period of decline. New powers, most notably Babylon under Hammurabi, rose in the south. Assyria, for a time, was overshadowed, its cities quiet once more under the stars. But the spirit of Ashur, the god and the people, was not extinguished. It merely waited, gathering strength, biding its time. The Assyrians, like the rivers that shaped their land, were patient. They understood that true power wasn't seized in a moment, but built slowly, layer by layer, stone upon stone. And when the time came again for Assyria to rise, it would do so not with the quietness of a ripple, but with the unstoppable force of a flood. As the twilight deepened over Mesopotamia, casting long shadows across temples, fields, and rivers, the Assyrians sharpened their weapons, strengthened their cities, and prepared quietly for the day when their banners would once again rise high against the sky. The world had not yet seen the full measure of Assyria's might. But soon it would. As the soft river mists curled once more around the low hills and ancient cities of northern Mesopotamia, Assyria slowly awakened from its long slumber. The patience of generations was coming to an end, and the quiet strength that had been forged in hardship and perseverance was now ready to rise like a storm across the lands. It began with a series of new kings, rulers whose ambitions reached beyond the walls of Ashur, beyond the familiar plains and rivers of home. These were men who understood both the delicate art of governance and the brutal necessities of conquest. They expanded Assyria's influence steadily, carefully at first, and then with an increasing confidence that would leave an indelible mark upon history. One of the first true architects of the new Assyrian Empire was Ashurnasirpal II, who reigned in the 9th century BCE. Ashurnasirpal was a man of immense energy and formidable will, his ambitions as wide as the sky above the Tigris River. Under his rule, Assyria transformed itself from a modest kingdom into a military powerhouse. He reorganized the army, introducing new strategies that blended swift cavalry charges, heavily armored infantry formations, and devastating siege tactics. No longer did the Assyrians rely solely on the stubbornness of their warriors. Now they wielded the keen edge of strategy, outflanking enemies, cutting supply lines, and striking when least expected. Ashurnasirpal II led campaigns that pushed the boundaries of Assyrian power deep into lands that had long resisted domination. City after city fell, either through negotiated surrender or, when necessary, through swift and overwhelming assault. Yet Ashurnasirpal also understood the delicate balance of rule. He respected local customs when possible, installed loyal governors, and demanded tribute rather than destruction from those willing to submit. To celebrate his victories, he moved the capital to a newly built city, Kalhu, or Nimrud, where magnificent palaces rose from the earth, their walls adorned with vibrant reliefs depicting scenes of conquest, hunting, and divine favor. These works were more than decoration. They were a silent language, a reminder to all who entered that the king was chosen by the gods, a living symbol of order and destiny. The images showed Ashurnasirpal as a larger-than-life figure, standing calmly amid chaos, protected by winged genies and divine spirits. In banquet scenes carved in stone, he dined under the stars with honored guests, feasting not in arrogance, but in celebration of unity and strength. Kalhu itself became a marvel of the ancient world. Its streets bustled with merchants and artisans, its temples reached toward the heavens, and its gardens bloomed with exotic plants brought from every corner of the empire. It was a city born of ambition and imagination, a testament to what the Assyrian people could build when guided by a vision grand enough to match their spirit. Ashurnasirpal's successors, including his son Shalmaneser III, continued this relentless expansion. The empire grew like a great tree, its roots deep in Ashur and its branches stretching far beyond, into Syria, across the Zagros Mountains, and toward the distant Mediterranean Sea. New roads were built, linking distant provinces to the heartland. Messages and orders traveled swiftly, carried by relay riders who galloped tirelessly from outpost to outpost, ensuring the king's will was known across vast distances. Fortresses and administrative centers sprang up along the borders, bringing not only soldiers, but also scribes, merchants, and priests, weaving conquered lands into the empire's growing tapestry. The Assyrians did not merely conquer, they governed. They standardized weights and measures, issued decrees in cuneiform script, and collected tribute that enriched the capital cities, Artisans crafted exquisite ivory carvings, intricate jewelry, and richly decorated weapons that blended beauty with deadly purpose. Yet for all their power, the Assyrians remained deeply spiritual, never forgetting their gods. Temples to Ashur, Ishtar, Nabu, and other deities stood at the heart of every major city. Priests and priestesses tended sacred fires, offered prayers, and interpreted omens from the stars, the liver of sacrificed animals, and the movements of birds. To the Assyrians, success in war and governance wasn't merely the result of human effort. It was a divine mandate, a reflection of cosmic order. Every victory confirmed that Ashur and the gods walked with them, guiding their hands and their destinies. As the Assyrian Empire reached ever outward, it became a force that shaped not just Mesopotamia, but the wider ancient world. Neighboring kingdoms and distant peoples spoke of the Assyrians with a mixture of awe, admiration, and fear. Their name carried weight, whispered across marketplaces, sung in distant taverns, and prayed over by rulers hoping to avoid their notice. Yet even amid all this grandeur, life for the ordinary Assyrian remained rooted in familiar rhythms. Farmers planted and harvested their crops along the riverbanks. Artisans labored in workshops filled with the scent of cedar and bronze. Families gathered in homes built of mud brick, telling stories of gods, heroes, and faraway battles under starlit skies. Children played along the courtyards of Kalhu and Ashur, chasing one another past towering statues of lions and winged bulls, their laughter rising into the warm evening air. They knew little of the politics that guided their lives, but they inherited a world built upon strength, discipline, and a deep, abiding sense of destiny. And so, as the stars turned slowly above the lands of Mesopotamia, the Assyrian Empire stood firm, unyielding as stone, swift as the desert wind, patient as the rivers that had cradled civilization since the world's earliest dawn. Its time of true greatness was only just beginning. Time, even for the greatest empires, moves with a quiet certainty, like the slow bending of reeds beneath the river's gentle pull. So it was with mighty Assyria, a force that had once seemed unbreakable, now beginning to feel the first, almost imperceptible tremors beneath its foundation. At its zenith in the 7th century BCE, Assyria ruled from the highlands of Persia to the shores of the Mediterranean. Its kings, Tiglath-Pileser III, Sargon II, Sennacherib, Esarhaddon, Ashurbanipal, had carved a vast dominion through might and brilliance. Their armies had thundered across continents. Their palaces gleamed with gold and ivory. Their libraries collected knowledge from every corner of the known world. Yet within this grandeur, unseen cracks had begun to form. The relentless march of conquest had stretched Assyria thin. Each new province required garrisons, governors, tribute collectors. Each subject, people needed to be watched carefully, for loyalty bred by fear is a fragile bond. Trade routes that had once filled Assyria's coffers now also brought new ideas, new ambitions, and quiet unrest. Meanwhile, the proud Assyrian kings often grew more distant, their courts lavish and inward-looking. In their palaces, Feasts and rituals masked the slow erosion of unity and purpose. Rivalries among the royal family and ambitious generals began to fester, like unseen rot beneath a grand facade. Still, Assyria endured. It fought rebellion after rebellion, crushed enemies old and new, and maintained an uneasy grip on its sprawling territories. But the cost was heavy. Cities were razed, peoples uprooted and relocated. Fear kept the empire together. But fear, too, can turn swiftly into hatred. Among the many peoples who had once bent the knee to Assyria was Babylon, ancient and proud. Long had the Babylonians chafed under Assyrian rule, their memories still filled with the quiet glory of Hammurabi's golden age. Though the Assyrians had rebuilt Babylon's temples and honored its gods, the city's spirit remained restless, waiting for a day when it might rise once more. That day crept closer, carried not by a single hand, but by the slow gathering of forces beyond Assyria's sight. To the east, in the rugged lands of Media, a new people, the Medes, had risen in strength. Skilled horsemen and fierce warriors, the Medes had watched the Assyrians with cautious eyes. To the south, in Babylon, discontent smoldered like embers hidden beneath ash. And to the west, smaller kingdoms once cowed into submission began to dream of freedom. The final blow would come, not from one enemy, but from many. It began with a series of revolts in distant provinces, small, isolated, easily crushed. Yet each rebellion chipped away at Assyria's resources and will. Meanwhile, Babylon found its champion in a man named Nabopolassar, a determined leader of Chaldean descent who understood that Assyria's strength lay in its appearance of invincibility. And that appearance was fading. Nabopolassar, careful and patient, first secured Babylon's independence around 626 BCE. He fortified the city's walls, rallied allies among the southern tribes, and reached out to the Medes, who were eager to find partners in resistance. Together, they wove a quiet web of alliances, patient and deliberate as weavers crafting a tapestry meant to endure. Meanwhile, Assyria's kings struggled to hold together their fraying empire. Internal dissent, economic strain, and the sheer exhaustion of constant warfare had hollowed out their once mighty armies. When the attacks finally came, first isolated, then growing, then relentless, the Assyrians found themselves fighting not a single enemy, but 1,000 small fires, spreading beyond control. In 614 BCE, the Medes struck first, sacking the ancient city of Ashur itself. It was a stunning blow, the heart of Assyrian identity wounded in a way no enemy had managed before. 2 years later, in 612 BCE, Nabopolassar and his Median allies laid siege to Nineveh, Assyria's glittering capital, a city famed for its libraries, palaces, and colossal statues of winged bulls. The siege lasted months. The defenders fought with desperate courage, but they were vastly outnumbered, and their allies had deserted them. Finally, the walls were breached. Nineveh fell in flames and ruin, its treasures looted, its people scattered. The once proud city, a marvel of human achievement, was reduced to ash and silence. An Assyrian general, Ashur-uballit II, tried to rally the remnants of the empire at Haran. But it was too late. The tides of history had turned, swift and merciless. Assyria, for so long a towering force, dissolved like mist beneath the morning sun. Yet from its ashes, new life stirred. In Babylon, Nabopolassar celebrated not just victory, but rebirth. The ancient city, long patient under foreign yokes, now stretched itself awake once more. Its temples were rebuilt. Its merchants opened new trade routes. Its scholars and priests resumed their sacred duties. Babylon, with its graceful towers and sacred ziggurats, prepared to reclaim its place as the heart of civilization. And just as Babylon rose from Assyria's fall, so too would a new vision of empire, softer perhaps, but no less ambitious. Under the starlit skies of Mesopotamia, as the Euphrates whispered its eternal song, the world turned quietly to a new chapter. The warriors had fallen silent. The dreamers were waking. Babylon would dream now, and history would listen. The city of Babylon, reborn from the dust of fallen empires, rose like a dream from the fertile banks of the Euphrates. Where once there had been ruins and regret, now there were shining walls, soaring temples, and streets alive with color, music, and life. It was a city not merely rebuilt. It was reimagined, shaped into a vision so breathtaking that later generations would wonder if it had ever truly existed, or if it had been conjured from the dreams of the gods themselves. At the heart of this new Babylon stood a king whose name would echo through time with reverence and awe. Nebuchadnezzar II. Nebuchadnezzar was born from ambition and tempered by wisdom. The son of Nabopolassar, the liberator of Babylon, he grew up hearing stories of Assyrian oppression and Babylon's yearning for freedom. When his father passed, Nebuchadnezzar inherited not only a throne, but a mission: to raise Babylon to heights no other city had ever achieved. And so he did. Nebuchadnezzar's reign, beginning in 605 BCE, was a symphony of triumph, creation, and expansion. He was a warrior when needed, leading his armies across the lands of Syria and Judah, ensuring Babylon's dominance over the ancient Near East. But more than conquest, Nebuchadnezzar loved the act of building, of leaving a mark upon the world that would outlive even the memory of war. Under his guidance, Babylon became a city of wonder. Massive walls, so thick that 2 chariots could race atop them side by side, encircled the city like a protective embrace. Towering gates, adorned with dazzling blue-glazed bricks and decorated with images of dragons and bulls, welcomed travelers from distant lands. Chief among these was the Ishtar Gate, a masterpiece of both art and devotion, a portal that seemed to shimmer like a jewel under the Mesopotamian sun. Beyond the walls, wide streets led to bustling markets filled with spices from Arabia, gold from Nubia, cedarwood from Lebanon, and lapis lazuli from distant lands beyond the mountains. Merchants called out their wares. Children played between the stalls. Priests and scribes moved through the crowds with an air of quiet authority. At the very center of the city, towering into the sky like a ladder to the heavens, stood the Etemenanki, the grand ziggurat believed by some to have inspired later tales of the Tower of Babel. Layer upon layer of mud brick and stone rose upward, each level narrower than the last, creating a stair-step mountain dedicated to the gods. It was a sacred place, a bridge between earth and sky, humanity and divinity. Yet even among all these marvels, one wonder outshone the rest: the creation of the fabled hanging gardens of Babylon. Though history blurs fact and legend, the story often told is one of love. It is said that Nebuchadnezzar built the hanging gardens for his queen, Amytis of Media, who longed for the green hills and lush valleys of her homeland. To ease her heartache, the king commanded that a terraced garden be constructed, rising high into the air, filled with trees, flowers, and cascading waterfalls, an oasis suspended above the city. Engineers, with their ingenious knowledge of irrigation and design, devised systems of pumps and aqueducts to draw water from the Euphrates, ensuring that every tree and blossom thrived, even in the arid climate. Travelers who saw the gardens marveled at them, speaking in hushed tones of a paradise where earth and sky seemed to kiss, where vines draped like curtains and fragrant blooms perfumed the air. In this way, Babylon became not merely a city of stone and commerce, but a city of dreams, a place where human hands, inspired by love and faith, had crafted beauty on a divine scale. But Nebuchadnezzar's vision was not limited to monuments. He also invested deeply in the soul of Babylon. Temples were rebuilt and expanded, especially the great temple of Esagila, dedicated to Marduk, the chief deity of the Babylonian pantheon. Festivals like the Akitu, the New Year's celebration, were revived with grandeur, reaffirming the sacred bond between king, people, and gods. Justice, too, was a cornerstone of Nebuchadnezzar's rule. He oversaw the careful management of agriculture, ensured fair taxation, and maintained the city's famed canals and irrigation systems. Grain, dates, wool, and pottery flowed through the markets, and Babylon grew rich, not just in wealth, but in spirit. Scholars and scribes flourished in this golden era. Mathematics, astronomy, and medicine advanced. Babylonian astronomers charted the movements of the planets, predicted eclipses, and laid the groundwork for future understanding of the cosmos. Their records, etched into clay tablets with delicate cuneiform script, would inform later civilizations for centuries. As Nebuchadnezzar aged, he could look out from the terraces of his palace and see a world that had been transformed by his vision. Where once there had been little more than memory and ruin, now stood the heart of the civilized world. A city where gods walked among mortals, where the dreams of kings took root in brick and blossom, water and light. Under the velvet curtain of night, as the Euphrates whispered its eternal song and the stars shimmered gently overhead, Babylon seemed to breathe, a living monument to humanity's yearning for greatness. And in those quiet hours before dawn, when the cool breezes stirred the gardens and the ziggurat's shadow stretched across the city, one might imagine that even the gods paused to marvel at what had been wrought. Babylon, under Nebuchadnezzar's hand, had become eternal. Even the brightest cities, no matter how glorious, must eventually yield to the turning of the world's quiet wheels. Babylon, in all its splendor, basked beneath the sun of its golden age, but far beyond the reach of its merchants and messengers, a new force stirred across the wide plains and rugged mountains to the east. This force would not come with the thunder of anger or the cruelty of ambition. It would come with something far more enduring, a vision of unity, respect, and destiny. At its heart was a man who would be remembered not only as a conqueror, but as one of history's most gentle giants. His name was Cyrus, Cyrus the Great. Cyrus was born around 600 BCE among the Persians, a people who lived in the mountainous lands of modern-day Iran. His ancestors were warriors and herders, toughened by the land, guided by ancient traditions of loyalty and honor. Little is known for certain about Cyrus's early years, and much of his story was embroidered with legend, as though the world itself had sensed he was destined for something extraordinary. What is clear is that when Cyrus came to power, he did not immediately seek conquest. He first unified the fractious Persian tribes, binding them together not through fear, but through fairness and shared purpose. He then turned his gaze toward the mighty Median Empire, which had long dominated the lands beyond the Zagros Mountains. In a swift and stunning campaign, Cyrus overthrew the Medes, not with the destruction that so often marked the rise of new powers, but with respect and integration. The Medes became partners, not slaves. Their traditions were honored. Their soldiers joined Persian ranks. And with this foundation of unity, the Achaemenid Empire was born. Cyrus's vision was unlike anything the ancient world had seen. Where others ruled by fear, he ruled by respect. Where others demanded submission, he offered protection and participation. He saw the strength that came from diversity, and wove the many peoples of his empire together with careful threads of tolerance, law, and shared prosperity. As Cyrus's star rose higher, the great cities of Mesopotamia took notice. Babylon, proud and resplendent, watched cautiously. Its kings, successors of Nebuchadnezzar, struggled to maintain the grandeur he had created. Internally, Babylon had grown restless. Tensions simmered beneath the surface. Political divisions, economic burdens, and the ever-present weight of maintaining so vast a legacy. Meanwhile, Cyrus moved westward, like a tide, patient but unstoppable. He conquered Lydia in Anatolia, absorbing its wealth and knowledge. He brought distant cities and tribes under his banner without destroying their cultures. He declared that all people were free to worship their gods, to speak their languages, to live according to their own traditions. In doing so, he became not merely a conqueror, but a liberator. By 539 BCE, Cyrus had turned his attention toward Babylon. The approach to Babylon wasn't marked by devastation. Cyrus understood that Babylon was no mere city to be razed. It was the heart of the ancient world, the cradle of laws, sciences, and faiths that had shaped humanity's earliest steps. To destroy it would be to destroy part of the world itself. Instead, Cyrus planned carefully. According to the accounts left behind, most famously the Cyrus Cylinder, sometimes called the world's first declaration of human rights, he sought not to destroy Babylon, but to restore it. The final campaign was swift and decisive. Cyrus's forces, led by his general Gobryas, found a way to enter the city without a prolonged siege. They diverted the waters of the Euphrates, lowering the river enough for soldiers to slip beneath the walls under cover of night. Babylon fell without a single great battle, without the bloodshed that so often accompanied conquest. When Cyrus entered the city, he did so not as a destroyer, but as a savior. He honored Marduk, Babylon's chief god. He freed political prisoners. He allowed exiled peoples, like the Jews, who had long been captives in Babylon, to return to their homelands and rebuild their temples. He reaffirmed the laws, respected the priests, and restored the damaged shrines. The people of Babylon, weary of internal strife and heavy-handed rulers, welcomed him with open arms. Under Cyrus, Babylon continued to shine. The temples remained active, the markets thrived, and the libraries kept their knowledge safe. The city, though now part of a greater empire, retained its dignity and its central place in the spiritual and intellectual life of the ancient world. But the wheel of history had turned. Babylon was no longer the ruler. It was now a cherished jewel in a crown that stretched from the Indus River to the Mediterranean Sea. It was part of a new dream, one woven not from conquest alone, but from cooperation, respect, and shared destiny. Cyrus the Great, by conquering Babylon with kindness instead of cruelty, had shown the world a new path, one where strength and compassion could walk hand in hand. And as the evening stars rose once more over the golden city, the Euphrates whispered a new song, gentle and eternal. Empires may fall, but dreams endure. The breath of Babylon slowed, but did not cease. Under the steady hand of Cyrus the Great and his successors, the great city continued to pulse gently, like a heart that had found a new rhythm, quieter perhaps, but still full of life. Cyrus's reign over Babylon was marked by a careful balance of old and new. The great temples, Esagila, Etemenanke, still drew worshippers. The priests still whispered their prayers to Marduk and recorded the movements of the stars on clay tablets. Merchants still sold spices and cloth in the colorful markets, and scribes still etched contracts, poems, and prophecies into enduring cuneiform script. But now, Babylon was also a crossroads, a hub connecting the vast and diverse Achaemenid Empire. Caravans arrived, not only from familiar lands like Sumer and Elam, but from the far reaches of Persia, India, Egypt, and beyond. Goods, ideas, and peoples mixed like the great rivers themselves, weaving a richer, broader tapestry of life. Cyrus, ever mindful of the fragility of empire, enshrined fairness and respect at the center of his rule. His edicts protected the temples of conquered lands. He established systems of taxation and governance that allowed local rulers to maintain much of their traditional authority, provided they pledged loyalty to the empire. In this way, the empire became a garden of many flowers, each different, each flourishing under the same wide sun. Upon Cyrus's death in 530 BCE, he was succeeded by his son, Cambyses II. Cambyses expanded the empire even further, bringing Egypt under Persian control. The Achaemenid Empire now stretched from the waters of the Aegean to the sands of the Indus, a dominion so vast that it seemed almost to wrap the known world in its embrace. Yet it was under Darius I, who came to power around 522 BCE, that the empire reached its most refined and organized form. Darius was a visionary administrator. He divided the empire into provinces called satrapies, each governed by a satrap who owed direct allegiance to the king. To ensure loyalty, he established networks of spies, the famed king's eyes and ears, who reported directly to the royal court. He built the Royal Road, a marvel of ancient infrastructure stretching over 1,500 miles. Couriers could travel from Sardis to Susa in a matter of days, carrying messages, goods, and decrees. Trade flourished. Ideas flowed like rivers. A traveler could journey from the edges of Greece to the mountains of Persia with relative safety, protected by the Pax Persica, the Persian peace. Even coinage became standardized. The gold daric and silver siglos circulated across the empire, making commerce easier, binding distant peoples together with invisible threads of trust. In Babylon, life adapted gracefully to these changes. Persian governors respected Babylonian traditions. Festivals continued. Learning thrived. Babylon's astronomers, under the patronage of the Persian kings, refined their observations of the heavens, laying the foundations for future mathematics and science. But nothing remains unchanged forever. Over time, subtle shifts began to wear on Babylon's spirit. The administrative weight of Persian rule, though efficient, gradually dimmed the city's independence. Decisions that had once been made in the shadow of Etemenanke were now sent eastward to Persepolis and Susa. Taxes, though fair, were burdensome. Loyalty, once born of gratitude, began to fray into reluctant obedience. When Darius's successors, especially Xerxes I, reigned, the bond between Babylon and Persia weakened further. Babylonian revolts erupted, fueled by memories of old glories and a yearning for self-rule. Xerxes crushed these rebellions with heavy hand and heart, stripping away sacred statues and symbols of Babylonian power. Though the city remained outwardly magnificent, an invisible sorrow settled in its stones. Babylon's decline was gentle at first, like the soft erosion of a riverbank. Trade continued. Scholars still studied the stars, but the city's heart grew quieter with each passing decade. The world around it changed. New empires rose in Greece, in Rome, across distant lands. And yet, even as the tides of power shifted, Babylon's influence endured. Its sciences, its laws, its myths and dreams, these had already seeped into the roots of civilization itself. Its memory was carried forward by every scribe who etched contracts into clay, by every priest who watched the stars, by every builder who raised towers to kiss the heavens. Cyrus the Great, though long gone, had understood something timeless, that the most lasting empires are not those built only by the sword, but those built in the hearts and dreams of people. And so, though Babylon's walls would one day crumble, and its streets fall silent, its spirit would never truly fade. As the stars spun slowly over the soft-flowing Euphrates, the city dreamed still. Its whispers carried across millennia, into lands and hearts it would never see. For empires fall, but ideas live forever. The world beyond Mesopotamia was changing, and the winds of history, once soft and patient, now stirred faster across the ancient plains. Though Babylon stood resilient beneath the vast Mesopotamian sky, the threads holding it to life grew thinner with every passing year. From the west, a new force rose, a force unlike anything the old kings had ever imagined. It came not from the deserts of Arabia, nor from the highlands of Persia, but from the rugged coasts and sunlit hills of Greece. At its head was a young king whose name would one day echo louder than the walls of Babylon itself: Alexander. Born in Macedon and taught by Aristotle, Alexander was a man of boundless ambition and restless spirit. To him, the known world was not enough. He dreamed of conquest, not just for power, but for glory. The eternal kind, the kind that defies even death. By the time he turned his gaze toward Persia, Alexander had already proven himself a commander of genius. He crushed Darius III of Persia at Issus and again at Gaugamela, and with every victory, the old Persian Empire crumbled further beneath his feet. Yet Alexander was not content with defeating armies. He sought to inherit the soul of the lands he conquered. Babylon, wise and ancient, awaited him. In 331 BCE, after the Battle of Gaugamela shattered Persian resistance, Alexander marched into Mesopotamia. His army approached Babylon not as a wave of destruction, but as guests to a sacred home. The gates swung open without a fight. The citizens welcomed him with offerings of flowers and songs, recognizing not a destroyer, but a new ruler, one who respected their gods, their customs, and their dignity. Alexander entered Babylon humbly, making sacrifices to Marduk at Esagila and ordering repairs to the temples. He was awed by the city's splendor, the towering ziggurat, the blue-glazed gates, the labyrinth of markets humming with life. In many ways, he fell in love with Babylon, seeing it not merely as a prize, but as a symbol of everything he wished to build. He made plans to establish Babylon as the capital of his new, blended empire. Greek and Babylonian traditions would mingle under his rule, creating a world where East and West met not with violence, but with understanding. But dreams, even those of great kings, are fragile things. In 323 BCE, just as Alexander was preparing new campaigns to the Arabian Peninsula and beyond, he fell ill within the palaces of Babylon. For days he struggled against fever, his commanders watching helplessly as the man they thought invincible withered before their eyes. Some said he was poisoned, others believed it was the gods, calling him home before he could challenge their domains any further. Alexander died at the age of 32, whispering his empire should go to the strongest. The empire he had built crumbled almost immediately into chaos. In the struggle that followed, Babylon, beautiful, ancient Babylon, became a pawn in the wars of his generals, the Diadochi. It passed between hands like a relic too sacred to destroy, yet too valuable to ignore. At first, Seleucus I, one of Alexander's most capable lieutenants, took control of Babylon. Seleucus understood its symbolic power. He sought to preserve its temples and traditions, even as he built new cities, most famously Seleucia on the Tigris, as his capitals. For a time, Babylon remained vibrant, a living bridge between the old world and the new Hellenistic kingdoms rising in Alexander's wake. But gradually, the center of power shifted. Seleucia's newer streets drew trade and settlers away from the ancient brick lanes of Babylon. As decades passed, fewer pilgrims came to Esagila to worship. Fewer merchants hawked their wares beneath the Ishtar gate. The ziggurat, once touched by the hands of kings and gods, stood increasingly abandoned, battered by time and neglect. The soul of Babylon began to drift away, like mist before the rising sun. Yet even in its decline, Babylon maintained a quiet dignity. Scribes still recorded the movements of stars. Priests still tended to sacred fires, even if the congregations grew small. The old rituals continued, whispered like prayers to the memory of better days. It is said that by the time new empires rose to power, Parthians, Romans, Sassanids, the once great Babylon was but a scattering of villages amid ruins, the ghosts of temples rising like broken teeth from the fertile plains. But those ruins, even as they crumbled, still spoke. They whispered of kings who had dreamed of heaven, of gardens that defied the desert, of rivers that carried stories as old as memory itself. They told of a city that had dared to reach for the stars. And though Babylon's time had passed, its spirit remained woven into the very fabric of human civilization, a reminder that greatness is never lost, only transformed. Under the starlit sky, by the slow and steady flow of the Euphrates, Babylon dreamed on, silent, eternal. As the centuries rolled onward, like slow, endless tides, Babylon sank deeper into memory. Where once proud kings had marched through shining gates and poets had sung under starlit skies, now only the desert winds roamed freely among the ruins. Yet the spirit of Mesopotamia, the spirit of the world's first cities, of the first words carved into clay, of dreams that had dared to touch the heavens, never truly faded. It lived on. The people who remained around Babylon's crumbling walls tended their fields as their ancestors had done for millennia. They drew water from the Euphrates, now silted and more wild. Shepherds guided flocks past shattered temples. Children played among the broken stones, unaware they were dancing atop the bones of history. Time, ever patient, covered the fallen palaces with dust and grass. Mud brick walls dissolved under rain and sun. Great statues toppled, their faces worn smooth by wind and centuries. The mighty ziggurat of Etemenanke, once thought to reach the heavens themselves, was abandoned, its bricks scavenged by generations who needed homes more than they needed memories. Yet despite this quiet decay, Babylon's influence rippled outward, carried like seeds on the winds of time. The ancient laws of Hammurabi, carved into stone so long ago, laid foundations for the legal codes of civilizations yet unborn. The astronomy of Babylon's priests, who once watched the dance of the planets from temple rooftops, guided sailors, scholars, and mathematicians across continents and centuries. Their measurements of time, their division of the day into hours and minutes, still govern the ticking of our clocks today. The myths that were first whispered under the wide Mesopotamian skies, tales of great floods, of gods who walked among men, of journeys into the underworld, were passed down and retold, weaving their way into the sacred texts and storytelling traditions of countless peoples. Echoes of Gilgamesh's quest for immortality can still be heard in the heroes and seekers of every age. Even the image of the tower reaching toward the heavens, the Tower of Babel, lives on in the collective imagination of humanity, a symbol of both ambition and humility. And through it all, the names of Mesopotamia's great cities, Uruk, Ur, Lagash, Akkad, Nineveh, Babylon, became more than places. They became ideas, symbols of humanity's first steps toward civilization, reminders of what it means to create, to hope, to reach beyond what is, toward what could be. Babylon did not vanish with a clash of armies or a sudden catastrophe. It faded the way a song fades after the last note is sung, quietly, elegantly, leaving behind an imprint so deep that even when the walls were dust, the dream remained. Centuries later, when the scholars of the Renaissance dusted off ancient manuscripts, when explorers and archaeologists dug into the earth seeking lost cities, it was Babylon and her sister cities they sought. It was Mesopotamia's light they longed to glimpse again. When the ruins were finally uncovered and broken tablets of cuneiform pulled from the soil, the ancient voices of scribes, priests, and kings spoke again across 3,000 years of silence. They told of taxes and harvests, prayers and treaties, myths and wisdom. They told of laughter and loss, love and longing. In their etched lines, the heartbeat of the world's first great civilizations could be heard once more. And we listened. Today, though Babylon sleeps beneath layers of dust and sand, it lives still. In every book opened in search of knowledge, in every law written in pursuit of justice, in every gaze lifted to the stars in wonder. It lives in the dreams of builders and poets, in the rhythms of cities pulsing with life, in the ceaseless search for meaning that defines the human spirit. For Babylon was never just a city of walls and temples. It was and remains a city of dreams. As the last light of dusk falls over the timeless Euphrates and the stars blink awake in the velvet sky, one can almost hear it still. The soft, eternal whisper of Mesopotamia, a lullaby of beginnings. A memory that will never fade. A testament to the truth that what we create in hope, in beauty, in wonder, lives forever.